we discuss the different platforms. We get into self-awareness of which platforms could work for them based on their audience, based on what content that they can create on their own, if they have a team, if it's just themselves. We go into kind of the basis of what kind of content would perform well on each. It's always important, for example, with a video, you want to get a quick hook at the start of the video. Well, the same thing kind of goes for podcasts or for writing a long form piece of copy where you want that first headline to capture attention.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Agostino. A personal brand is how others view you. Now, building a personal brand that lasts and grows long-term requires honesty, transparency, and complete authenticity. Now, based on these things, your audience of investors and sellers make the decision as to whether they want to do business with you or not. Well, today's guest knows about all these aspects of brand marketing, and she has helped businesses and brands, and entrepreneurs, of course, harness the power of social media to build their brands. Now, she is a former national team snowboarder, athlete, and lifelong entrepreneur. She runs a digital marketing company called 93 Agency and is passionate about helping other entrepreneurs achieve success in sport and in business in the same way that she strives to. She also hosts the podcast All In, featuring mindset, motivation, athletic, business, and lifestyle optimization content. She has also been featured on several notable media outlets, including the Globe and Mail, on her athletic, educational, and entrepreneurial pursuits. So if you like what Natalie has to say, you can reach her via her contact page at natalieallport.com. If you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show, and leave us a review if you like what you hear. Finally, if you text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, you get our free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Raising Capital. Well, so one thing that for many people is content creation, and creating content for LinkedIn versus Facebook, even versus TikTok. 3 different audiences, 3 different people, 3 different people looking at those 3 different platforms. There's some overlap between Facebook and LinkedIn, but it's kind of weird how people still look at they expect to see different things on both those platforms. So do you often coach your entrepreneurs that really sign up with you, like how to create that type of content, how to really become more appealing to those different audiences?
Yeah. So one thing it's almost an issue with every athlete, entrepreneur, anyone that comes to us is time. No one wants to be spending all day on social media. And so the first thing that we do is okay, let's explain, the different platforms, what people are looking for on different platforms. LinkedIn is a little bit more professional. Facebook, you tend to have a lot of family and friend type content. Twitter is a lot of news, current events. A lot of trends actually start coming from Twitter. Instagram is, of course, a lot more imagery, and TikTok is really, really fast-paced, quick videos that need to grab attention. And then YouTube, of course, is long-form videos that, again, kind of follow the same attention grabbing at the start and continuing on. And so we discuss the different platforms. We get into self-awareness of which platforms could work for them based on their audience, based on what content that they can create on their own, if they have a team, if it's just themselves. We go into kind of the basis of what kind of content would perform well on each. It's always important, for example, with a video, you want to get a quick hook at the start of the video. Well, the same thing kind of goes for podcasts or for writing a long form piece of copy where you want that first headline to capture attention. So there's little things, marketing tricks and psychology that go across all the different platforms. But then from there, we try to teach them what's the best way that you can create content at scale across all the platforms. And so explaining that, for example, I might post something on Instagram that's the image is attention grabbing, and then I write a kind of a longer form caption. How can I actually take that caption, tweak it, and put it onto LinkedIn and make kind of a long form, multi-line text feature, maybe a different image or no image at all, or attach a video and reformat that to do really well on LinkedIn? And then how can I take maybe 1 or 2 lines from that and break it into a tweet, or maybe a series of tweets where I have a couple lines and then a next line as a reply and keep going on. And same thing on TikTok. How could I break down everything I wrote in this long form piece of copy into a 15-second, really quick educational video? And so that's really what we focus on, because a lot of people, it comes down to time for them to create all across like 6 different platforms and be posting every day is crazy. So how can you take that one main message or that one main piece of content and reformat it to all these different places?
Yeah, well, content reuse is huge. Actually, and we were speaking in the green room earlier. Gary Vee is probably one of the masters at this. He'll record one of these long videos in front of a group of, in front of an audience, a big audience, and he'll reuse that same piece of content over and over and over and over again. I mean, I've seen him use it primarily on YouTube, to some extent, LinkedIn. I've not seen him do too much on TikTok, with the exception of what was it? A Q&A type scenario, I think it was, or maybe it was Instagram. But so he does use the same material over and over and over again, and he'll try to get as much mileage as he can out of that. But I think the hardest part, though, is getting all that work done, because it requires, as you pointed out, a lot of effort, a lot of time to do all this. So what sort of recommendations would you have to help someone out that's starting out, for instance, that's trying to get attention from investors? Is this something that they really should be doing hands-on, especially if they don't have the money to throw at a bunch of content curators and creators?
So I'll say this, because we get approached a lot, and we used to actually start with account management, and now we do more consulting and coaching. And so we actually get asked the same question pretty often, where it's like people just want to hand things off. And we actually have to walk them through now, because before it was about convincing people to hand things off. And now it's the conversation has flipped, where it's like, okay, they know they need to do this, they want to hand it off. But we're trying to tell them, actually, no, we think it's now better that you have a role to play in this. And I think at least at the start, that is very important, because like I said, the self-awareness part is so important, understanding these things. If you have a team come in and you understand none of these things, it's going to be hard to communicate to your team what you think is actually building your personal brand and putting, your most authentic self out there. When it's someone else posting, if they can get to know you really well and they see what you've done previously, that's going to help them be able to continue, speaking the same type of language, using the same communication style, just posting authentically like yourself. And so I think, especially for like an investor, I really think that people are going to be connecting with you and your personal story. And that's why it's important that at least at the start, you try to learn these things yourself and try to put yourself out there. So if someone does come and take it over, it's at least going to be as authentic as possible.
Yeah, I think that's it, though. You just hit the nail on the head. Is that authenticity is absolutely critical. And if you have this giant team, even if it's an offshore team or whatever, that's very, very good at cutting up all your material and making you look really awesome, like Gary Vee, for instance. If that investor, your target, doesn't feel that connection with you, then it's all for naught, right? I mean, and I think, and you pointed out too, it's like, say, doing a YouTube video or whatever, if you're doing a longer form type scenario where you're speaking directly to the camera, maybe about a deal you're working on, or maybe you're talking about how you've renovated some asset and you're able to bang up the rents on it, and now you're able to produce X amount of cash, and you paid off a bunch of investors, yada, yada, yada. That's a far better conversation with that audience as opposed to just talking on a stage, right? I think that's one way to build that connection. It sounds like, right?
Yeah. And I think even like, for example, I guess it'd be an extreme example, but put in perspective, like you're learning how to say post on LinkedIn. Imagine you go to make a YouTube video and you ask someone else to be the speaker, and they're telling your story for you. It's going to hit much differently than if it's you yourself, speaking that story in this video. And so I like to think about social media in the same way when it comes to a personal brand, very different from when it comes to like a corporation or an organization where they have whole social media teams. It's not the owner of the business, posting these things. But I just think it's so important that you have the skin in the game of putting yourself out there and going through those things. But not to say that you don't hire people who are really great at editing if you can, so that they can actually clip together those videos of you. But just make sure the video is you, the words are you, these things are you, and people can then put those things together and help you out with that aspect.
Excellent. Yes. So, you touched on mindset earlier, and I just wanted to maybe touch on that a little bit more. So when you were on a snowboarding team, how did all that come about? And what sort of mindset issues did you ever have to encounter when you're doing that? Because I mean, just to get on a snowboarding team, hell, to snowboard is hard enough.
Yeah.
let alone get on a team like that. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So mindset is just something like I've been really nerding out on, maybe I guess like the past decade, and something that I've just really realized is so important. I think I was just really lucky. Like growing up, I was very self-motivated, and then I got into like quotes, and so I would look up like all the Muhammad Ali and all these things, and I would have their picture, but their quotes on my walls, and I just saw like the power of their mindsets, because those words are really describing their mindsets about training. It's about hard work. It's about all these things and their confidence and all these things. And so I've always kind of thought about it. And then I was lucky to, when I first got onto the national team, I was on the junior national team when I think that was I was 17. I was just outside of high school. And my parents were like, okay, we need to really get you like into the gym and everything. And the person that they ended up hiring, she was a strength and conditioning coach for the local university hockey team. And she was in the middle of her master's of sports psychology. And so that's where things started to click, because that was one of the reasons that they wanted her to work with me, is because I realized, that could be beneficial. And so during our drives to the gym and all these things, she can be talking to me about some of the mental skills and mental performance of sport. As I moved up on the team, we started getting sports psychologists and different things that we were able to work with. And I, even just from a marketing perspective, I think I mentioned earlier that I was taking my business degree throughout the time that I was on the national team. And so every elective that I could possibly take was entirely psychology based. And I just had I love to learn about psychology. For me, I found I learned more of the business aspect of things, actually just doing them. And through, having clients, having to learn how to market myself, all these types of things. And so what I really enjoyed was those psychology type courses where I could learn about the mind and the power of the mind and how important that was to these things. And then when it comes to snowboarding specifically, there's a huge fear aspect. You could really hurt yourself, or worse, going off these 80-foot jumps that you are, and, going, spinning, flipping through the air, landing onto a metal object, spinning off of it. Like there's all these crazy things that you're doing. And so it's impossible to neglect the power of the mind in that sense. But I think a lot of it did come from being connected with sports psychologists. So that kind of just became a normal conversation. The books that my parents would read to me as a child were a lot of like autobiographies or biographies from parents of athletes. Like Tiger Woods' dad's book was a big one, things like that, where they really talk about the mental aspect. But it's just, I almost the things I know now, I wish I knew back when I was still competing in snowboarding. And I hope my whole life kind of revolves around that you keep learning more about yourself, your mind and mindset, and you just keep growing it.
Well, it's funny because you did touch on this earlier, that without having a fortified why, it's going to make your message, your outbound message in terms of your personal branding, a little tough to put your finger on, right? And really to communicate. And if you understand if you get your mindset right and help define the purpose behind why you're doing all this, it's not just about money. There are other things that go into really defining your why and setting your mindset. That's going to drive everything else that goes after that, including your personal branding, your marketing, your money raising, your deals, all of it. It's I think it's largely underestimated. A lot of people underestimate that critical component.
Yeah, I think the mind is huge. It's like 90% of everything. And even in sports where it's so physical, the mind is still that major difference when it comes to the LeBron, to the guy who's sitting on the bench in the Lakers. Like that's how I think the elite separate themselves from the rest. And I think it's such a huge part. And it's just funny how, a lot of people do neglect it until later in life when they're looking for what is missing, and they figure out, oh, it's like this whole aspect that actually controls every single thing that I'm thinking throughout my day that I've completely neglected, and I've just been going through these things unconsciously. And it's the same thing when it comes to your social media. If you've been going through your whole life unconsciously, that's going to come out in your social media as well. But having that why very clearly defined is so important. And what's interesting is brands kind of get it. Like the big brands now, they know that having a mission statement and a why is important, because then they can tell all their employees, this is our mission, this is our why. They can tell all their communications directors, all their marketing directors, all their social media directors, this is exactly, the message that we want to put out there. It's very clearly defined. But the fact that we don't do that in our own lives is just so interesting, because we can think about all these platforms as our our employees, that we need to know what we're doing and all these different aspects. And so just looking from how brands have done it is really what we can be doing in our own lives, where we have this mission, we have this why, and it makes decisions so much easier. We're not posting things and wondering, was that right? Was that not? It's like, if we know, hey, does this touch on my why? Is this, move me forward towards my mission? Then, okay, yes or no. That's the easy answer, and post or not.
Yeah. Well, and that's relevant too. You know what? Because there are people that just throw stuff out there. And I was watching one of these social media guys. He's saying, just put it out there. Who cares if it's not perfect, whatever. I think, though, he should have prefaced it with, it has to be congruent to your why, because there's some things you just don't want to throw out there, because if it's not congruent to who you are and what you're about, you're just going to confuse your audience. And if your audience is confused, they may not want to do business with you. That's kind of important, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like the gray area of the advice that we see on social media, right? Like, there's people who say, oh, you need to really have your brand really well defined. And there's people who say, post anything and everything. And I think they all do understand that it's a middle ground of that. But on social media, sometimes it's like, you got to post those extremes to get the attention, or you need to like rah, rah, rah. And then your next post maybe provides more content or information on that. So I think it is important, like, put that stuff out there, because social media can then give you the feedback to know, is that post, did it hit or miss? You learn from putting those things out there. But I do think that self-awareness and that why, that comes first. And then from there, getting the, the courage to just put yourself out there and get that feedback and keep tweaking and making improvements from there is also just as important. But it's hard if you just post things out there and you don't care, if you don't know your why or anything. When you do that, how do you know if that feedback is good or bad? Because there's feedback that you should ignore if it's like, okay, this is not my target audience. This person doesn't agree with what I'm saying, but it doesn't matter because they're not who I'm looking to reach. If you don't even know that, then it's really hard to even get in a direction from just posting all these things out there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yes. Is that now? And speaking of the mindset, then, is that one of the things you also touch on when you're talking to potential entrepreneurs? Then is defining their why, maybe writing it out, all that stuff, or do you just start with the audit first? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So usually we might do like an audit before the call just to know like where to start with people, and some improvements, and just depending on, the length of their time, whether it's like some people, they really just need a quick hour and like, here's some motivation. Some people are, signed on for we need to work through this and let's keep improving on these things. And so it really depends on, I guess, that aspect in a sense. But I would always get them to go through the why. I actually have like a branding guide workbook that I usually send people. And it's not like, it has a little section where it's like, if you have a business, your logo, your fonts, your imagery, these things. But that's just such a small part. Most of it goes through what are your values, what are, all these different things that can apply to both a business and to your personal brand.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people make the mistake of. They think a personal brand is just as a logo, font, colors, and it's way more than that. Just like you said, it's more like, what do people, when they see your image, what do people feel about you? What do they feel about you? Right. It's mostly emotional, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's almost just like defining the word self-awareness right there, is like, just knowing how you feel about yourself, how others look at you, all these aspects. And that's it's very congruent. Like it matches with personal brand, self-awareness, that go together.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So someone's listening right now and, they're looking for a piece of bulletproof advice from you. What would you tell them?
So I would say that there's two sides of things. So there's one is, like we touched on, working on your why, and knowing that why, I think, comes before everything. It's very easy to work hard and go in circles and just be going back and forth, chasing your tail if you don't know that, that answer to that question. And that can change. Your why might change many times. For me, my why have changed a lot of times. I retired from the sport of snowboarding and my why, changed from then on. But then at the same time, like we touched on with the people who are saying, just post, just go out there. I do think that a lot of people, and this is, a common issue that we face, and I think all of us, is like we fear judgment. And so putting ourselves out there, what are our colleagues going to think? What are our friends and family going to think? That's something that really holds us back. And so having that strong why, I think, kind of overcomes those things, but also actually just putting yourself out there and realizing it's not so scary. You build up those reps over time that it becomes easier and easier to keep doing it. And so action overcomes those things. So there's the side of thinking it through and having this, but there's also the side of like, hey, you got to take action, put out your first post, put out that first video, and then that will really keep building up the reps for you to have the, the courage and the confidence to keep doing it.
Excellent. Excellent. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right, guys. Well, if you want to reach out to Natalie, you can reach her via her website at natalieallport.com. Hope you got some insight on how you can use brand marketing to take on some new investors and even really question your why. Question why do you want to get into real estate? Why do you want to do what you want to do in terms of raising capital for your next deal? All very important things. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next episode. Take care. Hey, Agostino here, and I would love to connect directly with you. Text the word books to 202-410-4202 to receive weekly book recommendations from me.